afternoon. This is Emily Branscombe at NAMIC, and I would like to welcome you to today's webinar, Powering Operational Productivity Through Gen AI and Embedded Intelligence. We want to give a warm welcome to all of you who are joining us today. Before we dive into the main content, let's quickly go over some important details. You can find a copy of the presentation by clicking on the handout section located on the right side of your screen. Should you encounter any technical difficulties during the webinar, please don't hesitate to use the live support option found in the upper right corner of your screen. A member of the NAMIC team will be there to assist you promptly. Please take notice that we do operate under our antitrust statement, which you can find outlined on this slide. The antitrust policy will guide this conversation, and we kindly request that you follow its guidelines when submitting questions to our presenter. Along those same lines, all of our presenters are sharing their experience and opinions, which should not be construed as specific advice. We love participation, and we encourage you to participate in today's webinar by asking questions. If you would like to ask a question, simply submit it through the live Q&A feature on the right side of your screen. Our presenters will answer as many questions as possible at the conclusion of the presentation. We would like to take a moment to thank our 2025 webinar series corporate sponsor, Holborn, for their generous support of this year's NAMIC webinar series. We'd also like to thank Majesco for their support of the Industry Trends webinar series. At this time, we would like to welcome our presenters, Pat Davis and Denise Garth. Thank you both for joining us today.
Pat, we can't hear you.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. All right. So, everybody. So, my name is Pat Davis. I'm the advisors that and I advise on all things AI and data related for Majesco. I actually was the CEO and founder of a company called Utilant, who built a product called Loss Control 360, who was acquired by Majesco in 2021. And I'm still here at Majesco helping them with their data and analytics strategy. And hopefully today I can bring you some useful nuggets on your own strategy for generative AI and AI in general, and what you need to do with your data and some actual applicable use cases on using generative AI and how you tie those items up. The interesting part about generative AI is that it's risen faster than any other version of AI before. As you see on this chart, this is from McKinsey. In 2017, organizations, about 20% of organizations were using some form of AI. Fast forward to 2023, you're at 55% adoption. But since 2023, generative AI has gone from approximately 35% adoption to 71% adoption in just 1 year, and that's only through 2024. Generative AI has risen faster than any other technology in terms of what it can do, both to accelerate our businesses, but also in just the day-to-day use of just normal consumers and AI in general. It is risen to the point now where, for the first time ever, Google actually had a decrease in web traffic as a result of people using products like ChatGPT to answer questions as opposed to searching on the internet. So that's a pretty compelling stat for how much generative AI has made it not just into business, but also into the general population. This is a kind of a busy chart, but across all different types of geographies and industries and locations and job titles and ages, the use of generative AI tools has increased significantly. And as of right now, you can see basically the blue here is number of respondents using generative AI. And then the darker the blue gets, the more often they're using generative AI. The real highlight here is that approximately 30 to 50% of respondents are regularly using generative AI, both in their personal and work life. And another large percentage, 30 to 40% of people, are using it at least once. And again, this particular survey was from, I believe, late 2024, early 2025, and this is increasing every single day. And the reason it's increasing is that, again, generative AI has had some of the largest investment in AI ever, and also we've reached some really significant milestones in terms of its ability to perform human-like understanding and function. So, image classification is something that we've been doing for a long time. And even at Majesco, since 2018, we've been identifying hazards in loss control photos as an example. And image classification has actually gotten above human level performance as of approximately 2018. But certain other items like English language understanding really only came up in 2021, 2022 to above human grade recognition. And when you got into multitask language understanding, PhD and competition level mathematics and multimodal reasoning, those areas of data science really did not surpass human capability until 2023, 2024. So as of 2024, human performance and AI level performance, AI is actually beating humans in many, many categories. And that's going to continue to push its adoption into both business and people's personal lives, and speeding up tasks, speeding up what you do on a day-to-day basis, and making things faster and hopefully easier for many job types. Denise?
Yeah, so to tie back to what Pat said with regard to the growth and use of Gen AI, and his example of using ChatGPT versus Google. In our consumer research last year, we actually asked customers of insurance what was their use of ChatGPT and those types of technologies. You can see here that for many, it's well above probably would use this, particularly as it relates to getting information and questions answered. And even from a voice one like Siri and Alexa, getting that information and information provided to them pretty consistently across the board. It's used to help with forms and documents, to improving communication, to be able to improve claims reporting and all of that. But what is interesting is that there's a high expectation that they would use these technologies, but that their current insurance companies do not offer them. And that's a big gap in expectation. And so the key point here is that many people have embedded this into their daily lives, also their work lives. And there has been increasing expectation that they'll be able to use those in the different businesses that they interact with, including insurance. Next slide, Pat. And so when we asked in our strategic priorities report amongst insurers, what were the priorities for this year of 2025? We first of all asked them with regard to what's your top of mind issues. Profitability and operational costs and growth were the top three areas. And at the top of it was advanced data and analytics capabilities and optimizing operations. And why do those two things kind of tie together? The reason that they tie together is I want you to think about it in terms of the use cases that can be developed and used from a Gen AI standpoint, and now moving into agentic AI that Pat will talk about. These technologies can really drive down operational expenses and those expense ratios. And why that's really important for the P&C industry, if you go back and you look at most recently, Geico and Progressive. Progressive, has been at the forefront, leveraging data and analytics, particularly as it relates into, the underwriting and offering the UBI type of products that they do from an automotive. Geico was well behind. They've caught up on that, and they actually talked about it at their shareholder meeting this year. And in that conversation, they've made those investments into data and analytics to really kind of compete against them. But what was more important is that when you looked at their expense ratios, there was a huge differential between their expense ratios as compared to others in the industry. And so if you're able to kind of decrease your expense ratio 3, 5, 10 points, and in the case of Geico and Progressive, the difference between most other insurers is anywhere between 15 and 20 points difference from an expense ratio standpoint. You have a real opportunity to really drive down those operational costs and really drive better profitability. Pat, next. So when you think about it in terms of what insurers saying that they're doing, Most of them, when we looked at it, we kind of classified them as laggards, followers, and leaders. And you can see here that leaders pretty consistently across the board are focused in on data and analytics across the whole spectrum, from a BI perspective, putting all their data into a data lakehouse, developing their own AI machine learning models, but also now leveraging generative AI into the solutions from their partners. And then for some, beginning to actually build out their natural language processing models to be able to do some other unique things. There's a huge difference between these leaders versus, in particular, laggards, and in many cases, even followers. And so the pace of change that Pat talked about in terms of how rapidly it's been adopted and used within the broader population, the same thing is happening even within businesses, and how they're able to leverage it to really drive levels of productivity, levels of operational efficiency that we haven't seen in decades. And so what's really important for everybody to really kind of think about, this isn't just another new technology. This is about how you can rethinking how you do your business, how you have an operating model, what your process is going to look like to drive that 10 to 20 times productivity and be able to attract and retain new staff in your business. Back to you, Pat.
Thank you, Denise. So with that, we're going to do a quick poll, and it's, are you using generative AI inside your organizations today? If so, to what extent? And the first one is yes, informal or early adoption of non-integrated systems. So that would be using something like a ChatGPT or some third-party tool that's not integrated with your core platform. Yes, integrated systems or vendors with medium adoption. So you actually have an integrated vendor. Or yes, fully on board and using in our daily workflows as integrated, or no. So we'll give this 10 seconds. So as you can see from the poll, it looks like about 65% are very early stage. And it looks like some are looking at integrated systems, but no one, except for maybe one respondent here, is using it for their daily workflows, integrated with their daily workflows. So it's pretty great. So it means today we can actually disseminate some cool information for you guys on what you can use to move you down into the C, the B and C columns if you're up there in A, to help your organizations. Perfect. All right, great. I will reshare now. All right. So agentic AI versus just generative AI, what's the difference? I think a lot of people don't fully understand it because I think the word agent's being tossed around a lot. Agentic AI is something that can take instructions and execute and reason on its own. So if you think about generative AI, it excels at creating content, understanding natural language. It's wonderful at summarizing documents or policies. It's great at creating emails and proofreading. It's amazing at a lot of things. It can take a lot of data and summarize it down into topics that are not just topics, but actual information that's easy to digest, like taking a 100,000 word insurance policy and actually digesting it into easy to use sections. It can read contracts, etc. That's generative AI. It's chatbots, it's co-pilots, it's things that you use more often than not. What you're seeing today is generative AI. And it can bring meaningful productivity improvements. At Majesco in 2023, we actually came out with our first Copilot, which allowed you to do data inquiry. But then from data inquiry, where you could ask to summarize a policy, or did this policy get billed or paid, or when was it canceled, you then sort of had to move into actions. And actions are something that Copilots can still excel at. An action could be something like cancel this policy, write this policy, etc. But when you get into agentic AI, it actually can do more autonomous action and decision making. So it can perform tasks, make decisions without direct human interaction. So an AI agent really is an autonomous virtual agent, and it's a major shift in operating costs for it accelerates business flow. And the reason it does that, I'm not sure how many of you have built agents in something like Copilot Studio from Microsoft or another tool, but it allows you to give it a direction. Like, here's my exact underwriting guidelines. I want you to read in any document that's sent to this email address, use my exacting underwriting guidelines, And I want you to automatically read through those documents, those submissions. I want you to prioritize those submissions based on these rules. And then I want you to create quotes for submissions that match our type of business we like to write. That'd be an example of an agent. And that's the example of the type of prompting you would give it, or the type of directions you would give a true agentic process. What's typically sold as agents today, and still totally valid because they typically have versions of agents, is more workflow-based tools, which we can talk about in a second here. But workflow-based tools paired with agentic AI allow you to do multi-step processes that might have a more typical workflow, like pull data from here, pull data from there, go do this, then go do this, then run an agentic process on a scheduled basis. There's still agentic AI in that process, but it's not a pure play agentic agent at that point, because it is also workflow based. So it's probably an agent that's using generative AI along with a workflow, whereas true agentic AI, you're giving it a set of instructions and you're allowing it to autonomously execute on its own. We are actually bringing AI agents to our Majesco core platforms next year as well. And those agentic agents are something you can actually build out to perform policy actions or claims actions automatically on behalf of the user. And this is where you're going to see all core systems and providers eventually go, is allowing you to build agents and allowing you to automate typical processes that were manual in the past, but by using highly specific instructions that could be something like I mentioned before, like your exact underwriting guidelines. Dozens, hundreds of pages of underwriting guidelines are part of the instruction set as to how it executes. So again, agentic versus generative. Agentic is usually autonomous. It usually has a goal in mind, a set of instructions. It's typically real time. It can also be scheduled. It utilizes tools and APIs that are available to it to automatically execute, update data, pull data. It typically is going to continuously adapt and learn from its misgivings. And it can have independent decision making, again, though, based on the rule sets that you provide in natural language. And again, generative AI, it's very creative. It's output oriented, content based. It's not typically calling external tools, but you might say like, well, hey, Pat, I know the ChatGPT can call external services and all these other things. And that's really where generative AI is being strung together with other tooling to give you a richer experience, but it's not pure generative AI at that point. It's other tooling being brought to bear. There's no real adaptation in generative AI, and it's amazing at content creation. And it can make decisions based on input patterns, but it's not doing independent decision making. So again, those are just some of those differences. And when you think about agentic AI, you typically have a user request, you have an agent, and then you have these three different levels of that it goes through, right? So it's got perception, cognition, and action. And action is what it's actually using to execute those things. So a physical action could be calling a web service, or it could be inserting data into another system. It could be sending an email. It could be generating an Excel doc and sending it out. It could be canceling a policy. It could be inserting and quoting a policy. Those are the actions it can take. And the cognition is the memory, the knowledge base, and decision making. So you have to provide these agents with their prompting and with their knowledge so that they know how to execute. It's part of essentially their instructions. And if you think about it, if you had a junior claims agent and you need to teach them how to do their job, you're going to give them a set of claims adjudication rules. And you're going to say, when you go to adjudicate these claims, you need to follow this set of workflows and patterns. And here's our rules as a company. And here's when you can pay out this bodily injury claim, and here's when you can't. Here's the percent that someone would be liable in this circumstance, but not in this circumstance. Those are the exact same ways that you tell agentic AI, and to a certain degree generative AI, how to execute what it needs to do, is by giving it those instructions so that it can execute like a human being. And again, perception, that's where it's able to use data and input from all different areas in order to make that decision. So in our world in insurance, that's going to be things like policy data. It's going to be things like external third-party data. So if you think perhaps in commercial lines, you might be calling out to third-party data sources on the internet to bring in data about that particular risk. It's going to be claims photos. It's going to be claims data. It's going to be emails and correspondence with the insured or the agent. It's going to be policy documentation, loss control surveys. Can all be part of the perception and where it's getting its data from in order to execute its tasks. But really, that's what it comes down to. You're giving it a set of instructions. You're allowing it to automatically execute and use a set of actions that it has access to. And the perception and cognition is what's helping it to make that decision making based on the knowledge you give it. Some of the agentic value chain examples for insurance really come down to a couple of good examples here. And these are going to be probably pretty typical that you guys would say like, well, yeah, these are somewhat obvious. But intelligent underwriting, so real-time adaptation to risk, automatically pushing through low-touch policies, lower premium, lower risks, and having it automatically be able to underwrite that risk without much or any human touch. So my example before, and we'll show it a little bit later, of automatically creating a quote. We can bring in all of the documents from a submission. We can automatically generate a quote. We can automatically reply back with what that quote is. And as part of the rule set, I might give agentic AI, I might say, if the quote is under $5,000 in total premium, go ahead and automatically send it if it meets these parameters. If it's over $10,000 in premium, send it to somebody else. Send it to a human being to review before it gets sent out, just as an example. Claims processing, again, the most obvious example here is that it's automatically taking action against documentation being provided by the insured, and it's automatically adding those items to that claim, but also the automatic settlement of claims for, call it low dollar claims or low risk claims, and having them be auto adjudicated. Again, fraud using AI powered investigations and using third-party data sources, and customer service is a place that you're going to see the use of agentic AI and generative AI in general explode. And you probably already are seeing it interacting with it. You know, the clunky chat bots from United Airlines of the past are sort of gone, right? It feels like a different experience now. It doesn't ask you, I didn't understand your question, here's your 4 choices. Like that was the old version of, customer service chatbots. The new ones are actually much more sophisticated, and not only can do it in chat, but can do it on audio. So as you're having a phone conversation, it can go out, grab data, answer your question. Same thing with a chat. It can understand intent. And those types of agents that can automatically make those decisions and can provide customer service automatically are going to explode all over the place. If you're not already seeing them everywhere, you will see them everywhere in the next the next 12 months. So some of the projects we've worked on here at Majesco, these are a few of them, but intelligent quoting, again, I guess the reason we bring it up here is that these use cases have a lot of impact to your business. So for intelligent quoting, it's automatically generating quotes from submission documents and data. And it goes from a process that's an hour to 2 hours to about 10 to 15 minutes in total. Here it just says 20 minutes, but it depends on the complexity. But again, the ability to bring in submissions and quotes and automatically pre-fill all the fields and run the rating is what our intelligent quoting does. And that's using agentic and generative AI along with our Copilot to be able to create those quotes automatically. Intelligent cash allocation is another one. Automatically processing payment files of any format and accelerating allocations. Invoice processing for claims. Now we can automatically pick up claims documents and automatically attach them to the claim, but we can also automatically grab the data out of that invoice and pre-fill the claims data, including what body shop it is for an auto example, and who needs to be paid, what the line items are, and whether or not it's approved or not. And one that's near and dear to my heart, intelligent survey assessment, which I'm going to show you an example of here. That actually allows you to bring in large, complex documents about a piece of property. Could be from another agent, could be from another or a broker, it could be from a prior carrier, it could be documents about that insured, and it can automatically create loss control surveys or pre-fill loss control surveys off of very complex data. And what's really interesting about that, because it's what we're going to actually show examples of, is that it's using highly complex prompts. And those are the instruction sets that we talk about in generative AI to be able to answer questions about those highly complex documents that are being read in. So this is the loss control survey we were talking about. Over on the right, this is a fake company, but this is BlackRock Insurance, not real. And this is a typical long form loss control survey, right? So these typical long form loss control surveys are usually passed around quite a bit between agents, brokers, insurance companies. When people are getting a quote for a complex risk, these loss control surveys will be sent around to multiple places for quoting. So a couple things that you guys can take away from this. One, generative AI is a great use case for this. We can take 50 plus highly technical pages per report, hundreds of pages even. We have examples of over 400 pages of loss control engineering data. And we can utilize out-of-the-box models like OpenAI, Azure, AWS, and then we can provide fine-tuning and highly sophisticated prompt engineering to be able to read in highly specific pieces of data from that loss control report. But more so than just reading a piece of data, this is not OCR. This is understanding. So what you're going to see in these prompts that I show you next is that it's actually taking highly sophisticated prompting to actually assess using underwriting guidelines the data that's in the report and then answer a question for a policy based on that. One of the other things that I think is a really key thing you should think about if you're tying up this type of data is that although these platforms are amazing and they can bring in even handwritten notes, you're typically better off doing pre-processing of some of the documents that go into them. So there's all kinds of tools with Azure and AWS. Azure, I know particularly well, but there's things like Azure Forms Recognizer is like an interim tool that you run the document through that will automatically do some of the OCR and a bunch of the cleanup on the tables and tag them the right way so that AI understands them better and faster with higher accuracy. So there are some really great data cleansing utilities you can run on your documents before you send them off to generative AI. So here's an example of a prompt, and this is where things get a little crazy. So if you're thinking about a loss control survey that's 100 pages for a property, the prompt is, you are an expert in property loss control. I know this sounds crazy, but you're telling the generative AI what their persona is. Okay, so I'm telling the generative AI, you are an expert in property loss control and underwriting risk assessment. Please review the following loss control report and determine whether it includes a formal impairment program for fire protection systems. Now, I can't even show you this whole prompt because the whole prompt is actually like 4 pages long. Okay, so I'm just showing you the start of it, just so you get the idea. Again, we're telling the generative AI, your task includes detection of a formal impairment program. Search the document for explicit or implicit indications of formal impairment programs, such as written procedures for handling impairments to fire-specific protocols for the notification of the fire department and insurance carrier. I did ... here because this just point 1 was over a page long. It was the specific underwriting guidelines for what an impairment program must include for that insurance carrier's property program. Point 2, underwriting acceptability criteria. Compare the impairment program against underwriting guidelines. Valid elements might include pre-planning, formal written processes, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So this prompt was pages and pages of instructions that we're giving generative AI. It's going through 50 to 100 pages of highly technical information. And it can actually figure out if there's an impairment program, not just based on one word in the document that says impairment program, but can actually figure out if multiple places within the document, there are different elements of that impairment program relative to the underwriting acceptability criteria or the detection protocols we gave it here. Now, I'm going to give you kind of an easier example out of this document, but you'll kind of get the point. So when we ran this, we were in our Copilot, we said, is there a formal impairment program? It said, yes, there's an impairment program. It's on page 20. But again, this impairment program is actually called impairment handling. So this is not OCR. This is not Control F, find. And it's saying there is an impairment procedure implemented and resides emergency response plan, includes fire department communication, full-time fire watch, hourly log sheet, suspended package of flammable products, and heightened awareness. So the items for department communications, fire watch, and log sheets was part of the underwriting guidelines that we provided that prompt that allowed it to read in that loss control survey and then to make a determination, not based on, oh, did it have a impairment program, maybe yes or no. It actually took all the different parts of the document and then made a determination if the impairment program in this document matched my underwriting guidelines. So another example, which is much simpler, is smoking controls. And again, in this particular circumstance, it's detection of a smoking control. Same idea. You are an expert in property loss control and underwriting risk. Review the following loss control report. Here's what the detection of a smoking control program will look like. Here's the underwriting acceptable criteria. And yes, it was able to find this. It was in multiple pages of this document, but this was one of the citations we had for it. It had 3 other areas of the document where there was information about smoking controls and processes on this particular doc. And where does that really go, right? So we built that out jointly with one of our clients. To put it in perspective, that client processes over 100,000 property loss control surveys a year, usually large commercial lines risks. And they actually have a team of people that read through old broker reports to generate loss control surveys in much the same fashion I just showed on the screen, right? So we took that from being a 2 to 3 hour process per loss control survey times 100,000 a year, and actually take that down to about 7 minutes per loss control survey, automatically executing that against those document types. And again, this is so much further along than maybe 5-6 years ago, when you guys are probably used to seeing companies that would ingest accord forms, right? Like, I know I'm showing an accord form here, but these are pretty simple to read in. It's when you get an accord form plus you get 8 other documents from the agent that can be related to anything about the policy that don't follow a standard format, that things get more interesting. And that's where like these generative AI tools are amazing, because they can take these super specific instructions for reading in the data from these documents, which, I mean, let's be honest, in insurance, documents and even digital documents are still a huge, huge part of what we do. And so that's one of the places we decided to tackle first, was really using generative AI for document processing. I don't want to call it reading, because it's not reading. It's actually reading, understanding, and then applying guidelines to, and then getting the data out of it, based on my guidelines, based on my exact system. So this is what we did for, and again, I said this approach works equally as well for forms. And the example still holds. It's intaking dozens of documents potentially from a submission, utilizing agentic platforms and AI to automate the intake and processing and generation of a quote. And the prompt engineering is very similar to what we talked about on the last 2 examples. And you can see this particular policy here, Cozy Recycling. We were able to automatically generate that revision. Again, we use some sample data here. This is not a real insured, and this is a test system. But we were able to automatically create the quote, figure out the installment plan and the total amounts due, based on the documents that were attached. So, how do we do this stuff, and how is that maybe different than what you guys might do? So we're a Microsoft shop here at Majesco. So we like to use Microsoft-based tools. It doesn't mean that you can't use Google Cloud, you can't use AWS. I guess the real point, though, is utilizing cloud available tools is going to accelerate your adoption. And when it comes to agentic processes, and when it comes to enterprise compliance with large language models, we have chosen to backbone our entire software program off of the Microsoft Agentic AI platform and the Microsoft Copilot platform. And that's really because they provide an amazing framework that allows us to build out these types of copilots and agentic processes around our Majesco products, which have hundreds, if not thousands, of web services that allows the agentic AI and the copilot to be able to read data from our systems and push data into our systems as necessary. And Microsoft does a wonderful job of the compliance behind that, of not having that data leave your tenant, of encrypting everything, PII stripping, not storing any of the data. All of the things that we worry about from a compliance perspective, Microsoft is really wonderful at making sure that it is enterprise grade and enterprise compliant for insurance. So Microsoft is our agentic platform. I would not recommend that you build your own agentic AI platform or train your own AI or generative AI model. I think that would be something that would be very, very cost inefficient. I recommend you go with the various platforms that exist out there today, and you build them against what you have inside your organization already. So, if in your organization today, you've got policy billing and claims systems, you've got internal data warehouses, you've got a loss control system, you've got an agency system that you're working with, you would use this platform in the center to be able to integrate all those different systems and their services and their data feeds into an agentic platform that could take action in a compliant way. So again, we're all in Microsoft Agentic AI and Microsoft Copilot platform. You guys can choose a different one if you'd like, from AWS or from your cloud provider of choice. we love the Microsoft side of it, and it has allowed us to scale in a way that you might not think. So I remember when our chief products officer, Manish Shah, came to me and said, we need to build this really complicated Copilot. It's got to be in all Majesco products, and it has to be able to access all of the data for policy billing and claims, and it needs to be able to answer questions and take action. And I kind of was like, oh man, this is going to be a huge lift. And he came back to me and said, here's the thing, man, our data science team is not big enough to do this. Like, we have a pretty big data science team, but not that big. He said, you need to focus on creating tools and using platforms that allow our core platform providers, our core platform software engineers, to utilize those tools to bring the Copilot and the agentics to the platform. And that's exactly what we did. You know, we picked Microsoft as our Copilot and agentic AI provider. We produced tools and plugins for that to make it easier for our larger group of developers to be able to utilize those tools. And then our large group of developers all around the world at Majesco were able to utilize those tools to take meaningful action inside of all of our products. And in that way, I would recommend the same thing for you guys. You have to focus on creating generative AI and agentic platform sort of as a hub. And then your spoke is all your other systems that you guys might have. And you need to make it so that the developers that work on those other systems can utilize that agentic hub and that generative AI hub. And you need to focus your data science teams on the hub. So in this poll, we're saying, what generative AI platforms are you using today, if any? Microsoft Copilot, either as part of Office or not. ChatGPT, maybe a core system that you're using with generative AI embedded, or other tools like GitHub, Windsurf, Cursor, et cetera, within your organization. Or no, are you not using generative AI platforms? All right. Seems like a decent number of us are using Microsoft Copilot. Microsoft Copilot has certainly gotten better over the last 6 months. It had its tripping points for a little bit there, but it's gotten much better with the Office suite as of lately. And ChatGPT is obviously a gold standard as far as its ability to integrate with other things and get constant updates. So that's also a really great platform. I think ChatGPT has a little bit of work to do on the enterprise side as far as making it integrated with core products, but it's definitely one of the most advanced from a model perspective and from what it can call from a data perspective. So it's good to see. Okay, excellent. I'll go back to presenting now. So what are the tools that we use here at Majesco? And I'm not saying you should use these tools. I guess my point is these are examples of tools that we use in our organization. And if you're the CTO or CIO of an insurance company, you should be thinking about these toolings, right? So GitHub, there's other examples between GitHub and GitHub Copilot that you guys could be using. There's also things like Windsurf or Cursor. Those are excellent tools for both source code repository and for what's called an IDE, which is essentially your development environment. So they have all kinds of really great AI tools that are embedded into them for doing things like test case writing, code linting. Code linting is basically checking your code for quality, checking it for bugs or errors. And it can actually generate users as well. Now, I will tell you, as much as people are like, you can generate a whole website using AI today. Yeah, not in insurance. We're financially regulated. We need to make sure that these things are accurate, not laden with tech debt and work. If you need to do real coding where you have to rely on the results on a day-to-day basis for an enterprise, you have to have Copilot-like tools like GitHub Copilot that are helping your developers to be more efficient. They're not replacing your developers. That's not here yet. Regardless of what anyone says, AI-based coding for organizations like ours is not there, and it's probably not going to be there for several years. Because I think my favorite statement was, generative AI for coding generates tech debt at the speed of AI. So if that puts into perspective for you, definitely think about having IDEs like GitHub Copilot, Windsurf, Cursor. Those will help your development team speed up a good 15 to 20%. They'll certainly help your QA team significantly as well. They'll help your code quality. They'll look for security issues. They do amazing things. And it's table stakes for your development team that you guys have today, if you don't have it already. The nice thing about that too is that you still have a human in a loop on all those. So there's not a lot of compliance issues there. We also use Wiz and Veracode here at Majesco. Wiz is a pretty amazing tool for AI security, and we use it actually for basically getting sensor data from all of our production and non-production systems, and it uses AI to detect any malicious activity. It is a central repository for all security alerts and all machine alerts, and it uses AI to analyze that to look for any suspicious behavior across the entire organization, across all production systems and local systems. So Wiz is a really cool tool. It's got amazing alerting. It's got great AI in it. And I would definitely recommend that for your organizations. And Veracode's another tool we use that also uses some AI to test our systems for security compliance. So again, another great tool for security review and compliance of your systems. And then one of the things that we did recently is called Majesco Intelligence. And this is something I think you guys can take away. We are, even though we're a software company, we're sort of eating our own dog food a little bit, right? So we sell generative AI systems and software, but we recognize that internally, we also need to consume AI and use AI to improve our own operations. So we actually came up with our own tool called Majesco Intelligence that's built on a back end that has indexing. And we're having that index all of our knowledge bases internally, which is something you guys should think about. There's several providers of software that do this as well out there, where you can look for generative AI enterprise indexing tools. But essentially what they do is they index all your knowledge from all your different systems that are standard systems. And then that knowledge is put into a generative AI system for RAG, retrieval, augmentation, generation. And it's got all the compliance built into it. So think about O365, Teams, your Jira, your Zendesk, your Confluence, your ServiceNow. I kind of go down the list. It indexes all that information and then makes that enterprise knowledge available in a compliant and secure way that's got the appropriate security controls on it. So imagine being able to ask a question in your organization like, what line of business was the most profitable in 2024? That's a very easy question it can answer. But it can also answer questions like, please show me all interactions with insured Patrick Davis at 123 Main Street. And it will actually go across all your systems and actually look for anything that matches that, summarize it appropriately, give you citations, et cetera. So Majesco Intelligence, for us, is like having a chat GPT inside of our company that understands 100% of Majesco knowledge. It does not contain any of our client data, but it's 100% of Majesco's internal knowledge base. And you guys should be thinking about that as insurance companies as well, that having all your knowledge in one place, that generative AI can hopefully help your users to find data, disseminate it, summarize it, et cetera, can be very, very beneficial to your organization. And again, I think some of the obvious examples you give here is like guidance on product capabilities, implementation patterns, support ticket triage, are all use cases we're using this for. It actually brought our support ticket triage time from 2 hours down to 2 minutes, just to give you an idea of how we're using that internally. So with this, I kind of said that the true power of large language models and AI resides in their remarkable capacity to augment and amplify human capabilities. So ChatGPT came up with this quote for me. So it saved me having to make this slide or quote. So it's already doing it. I think the real point to this is that the era that we're currently in, but we're right on the cusp of, is generative AI is more of a co-pilot that requires a pilot still, especially for insurance, where you kind of, we're a little more touchy about things automatically happening and compliance than most industries. And so that's where we're at. And we're on the cusp of the next step. And that next step is really the agentic processes we're talking about, where it's taking action on its own and not involving the human at all, unless it's got an anomaly or an exception. So we're right there. I mean, we're talking like in 6 months to 12 months. I mean, the term agentic AI and agentic processes is going to be in every one of the decks every vendor presents to you, I would assume, because that's where the world is moving. In insurance, we're always one step behind, it seems, it's on purpose. But that's where we're at. We're right there right now. That this AI today is a co-pilot for insurance. It's moving to the place where it's going to be the pilot for tasks that are considered low risk. And that's going to happen sometime in the next 6 to 12 months, where that's going to become common. So my key takeaways for you guys today, let me talk about some of these. So having a solid data strategy might seem like a very obvious thing, but if you can actually get all your data into a single location, if be that Snowflake or Synapse or what have you, that will help you tremendously when you're doing either model building and creation. So if you're actually having your data science team build, a model for automatically identifying claims fraud or whatever it is, classifier models, that's where you'll have your data science team working out of, is your centralized data warehouse. But it's also a place where you can use generative AI to be able to query into your central data warehouse. So in circumstances where you don't have direct web service access to maybe a system that you guys have, but you do have all the data in your data warehouse updated on a frequent basis, you can actually use that as the data repository that generative AI and copilots can use to actually get that information. So again, solid data strategy. I mean, I'm sure you guys have heard this for the last 5 years, but getting all your data from all your systems, all your core vendors into one data warehouse, including all your custom stuff too, is really, really key. And there's some great tools out there today. We use Qlik Replicate, QLIK. Shout out to another Thoma Bravo company on that one. But it allows you to essentially replicate data from all different types of data sources into all different types of targets, including some complex data sources like Salesforce and things that are purely services, things like SQL Server, Oracle. Those are all table stakes, and it can sync it into a cloud data warehouse. And that's wonderful tooling to get your cloud data warehouse strategy kicked off and to quickly accelerate it. You really should be using out-of-the-box models like OpenAI through Azure and AWS. There's all kinds of examples. You guys could use Claude. You could use Sonnet. You can use whatever you want. It doesn't matter to me. But I guess the point of this is that the out-of-the-box models from the core cloud providers are going to be your fastest way to get going. And it's going to be the models that get updated the most often, have the appropriate horsepower behind them. And they've spent a lot of time and money building those models. So that's where you're going to get the most horsepower and bang for your buck. Even if you have ongoing running costs of calling those models, there's nothing faster than using those cloud-based models to accelerate your data science organization. Again, there's agentic platforms and AI platforms that can help you accelerate your ability to build. So we talked a little bit about that today, how we're all in on the Microsoft Agentic platform, the Microsoft Copilot platform. There are platforms available out there from every major core provider for providing this type of functionality. This is another one that you don't want to build yourself, if I'm being honest. Everything from how these things run in the background and how they scale, what actions they can take. I mean, these are all things that these companies are spending millions of hours to build out. And if you want to go fast in this world, and if you want to be able to build these things for a reasonable amount of money and have your company be able to take use of them, you need to utilize the platforms from the big providers, the big cloud providers, to have that quick lift. And the last one really is making sure you utilize core system providers that have an AI strategy. We obviously do here at Majesco, but your max and immediate uplift is going to be when you're using vendors that when you get an update, you have AI baked in and your users can use that and it's tested and compliant directly as part of your core workflows and platform. So again, that's probably your fastest way with the least amount of money spent is the core system provider. And then building your own, these top three are extremely core to any strategy you guys need to have. All right, our last poll. What areas of P&C insurance do you believe will be the most impacted by generative AI and agentics? Claims, underwriting, billing, quoting and submission, or administrative tasks? All right. Still have some polls coming in here, but it looks like claims and underwriting are winning the race. So yeah, I totally agree with a lot of these. I think administrative tasks you're going to find is going to be one that really is going to also take off in a big way as far as any sort of like TPA work or any sort of manual processing. Underwriting for sure. I think claims we've been seeing more and more AI come to for a while now. And obviously we talked a little bit about quoting and submission earlier today. But these are all great examples of where I also believe that AI is going to have a big input. So thank you for those responses. And I'll go back to the slide deck. Perfect. And this last one really is, AI is the biggest shift insurance has ever seen. I mean, and it truly is. I mean, insurance has been around for a very long time. And this era we're in, these last 2-3 years and the next 2 or 3 years, Denise talks about it all the time, but laggard versus leader. Do you want to, be behind in this shift, or do you want to be at the forefront of it? And as she mentioned, you got some companies out there like Geico and Progressive known for being really in tune with their data strategy and analytics strategy. And I can bet you that those are also the types of companies that are thinking about generative AI and the use of AI to improve their ratios and their pricing and everything that goes with it. So it's not really the time to wait, it's the time to lead in AI. And with that, it's my last slide, and we'll open it up to questions, I believe. So,
If you have any questions for our speakers, please submit them through the live Q&A feature on the right side of your screen. We will address as many questions as time allows. Pat, we do have a question here that says, what's the best low-risk entry point for insurers looking to adopt Gen AI?
the best low-risk entry point. Well, that's a great question. There's obviously, the lowest risk entry point is to enable any sort of vendors that you already have to use their baked-in AI. They will have already tested it. It'll already be compliant. It'll already give your users built-in lift. So that's sort of obvious. So if you have any sort of core systems that have AI tools, which they're probably marketing to you like crazy, that's probably where I'd start. The other places I would sort of look to are things like Microsoft Copilot Studio. So that's not really a core system, but it's certainly part of the tools that I'm sure almost every user at an insurance carrier is using on a daily basis. But my caution would be, even with something like Microsoft Copilot Studio for Office 365, is that the training and adoption has to be closely watched. We have found through our own use of AI inside of our organization that when we roll out generative AI tooling to our users for operational efficiency, we get about a 50% uptake out of the gates with people who really want to use it to make their job faster, better. And the other 50% of people are really lagging behind in their use of it. And we found that training them on how to use those tools and making sure that they do use it, like actually tracking their usage and actually prodding them to use it more often, is really the only way to get a lot of adoption for those tool types. But that's what I would say. The lowest risk entry point is turning on AI, licensing inside the tools you already use day to day is the lowest risk entry point, period. If you're doing your own coding, I guess the next place would probably be to look at things like BI tools that have AI built into them, like Click BI is a good example. The newest version of Power BI is another great example where they're doing quite a bit with AI for natural language querying and report generation. I think that's another relatively low risk place because it's not interfacing with the policyholder or the premium or taking action. It's purely on a reporting basis.
We have another question here that says, what are the biggest operational hurdles when integrating generative AI into legacy systems?
Another great question. I guess my answer to that would be that typically legacy-based systems, even if they're from a vendor, if they're truly legacy, they probably don't even have web service-based infrastructure. For those on the call, hopefully you know what web services are, but a web service is a way to either over a private network or over the internet to be able to call an endpoint on a piece of software and return data or update data in that software. So with legacy systems, I think the biggest hurdle is that you don't have those types of that type of service infrastructure that you need in order to pull that data or push that data back into the platform. So that's kind of where my recommendation came from with the data lake side of the house, which is if you can at least get your data out of that platform, you can use generative AI tools to be able to go against your data warehouse. So again, Click BI, Power BI, the major BI providers have some pretty slick AI tools for doing data analysis. But you can also use that for data summarization. So if you wanted to actually come up with your own Copilot for policy questions and such, you can also use a data source similar to that, similar to a data warehouse to perform those functions as well. But that's usually the biggest hurdle. I'd also say with legacy systems, if you're going real legacy, is that these systems are really targeted towards web-based systems. Again, because web-based systems will typically have service infrastructure and they will have modern stacks for coding. But desktop applications and I hate to say this, but like COBOL or mainframe applications are really not something that has great applicability here. So you have to fall back to what I was saying with true legacy systems. It's get the data out of them, get it to a data lake and use AI tools there. You're going to have a very hard road trying to pull data or push data into a true legacy platform using AI tools. Especially if it's a desktop based application or if it's, mainframe or COBOL based.
We have another question. It says, how are insurers managing sensitive customer data with Gen AI tools?
That's a good question. One of the reasons that we mentioned some of the enterprise tools, like Microsoft's implementation of OpenAI, is that they have compliance tools built into the tooling that you use from them or license from them that allow you to do PII, PHI filtering, and masking directly in the tool set. So it makes it a lot easier on your uplift of implementing those tools so that you don't have to be the person that identifies all the PII and PHI and do all the mapping. Instead, the tooling itself actually has filters for that built in. So that's probably one of the bigger things. And then from a compliance perspective, again, those major providers really do have the compliance reporting tools as well, where they can actually show you the amount of times that sensitive data was cleansed or scrubbed or what have you in the system. So, and the same thing with the data lake procedures. So when you're using tools like Click BI or Azure Data Factory, you can actually do masking of PHI, PII, and other sensitive information prior to it being copied into your data lake, which is also another great practice depending on what the content of that data lake is.
It doesn't look like we have any more questions, so let's go over a few reminders before wrapping up today. To view the recording of today's webinar, simply return to this webinar portal and locate today's session on the timeline. There you'll find a link to the recording. Should you encounter any difficulties accessing this or any other webinar recording, feel free to reach out to events@namic.org. Keep in mind, webinar recordings will be available within 48 hours after the live session. NAMIC is offering a variety of upcoming in-person and virtual events. For more information, please scan the QR code on the slide. As you exit the session today, a survey will pop up. We greatly value your feedback and encourage you to spend a moment to complete it. We would like to thank Pat and Denise for taking time to share their knowledge and expertise with us, and we thank all of you for attending this webinar. Have a wonderful afternoon.